I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. I know traffic's been tough, and our normal Minnesota winters make it even tougher. Tonight is the first of 3 listening sessions that the Attorney General Keith Ellison and I have set up to hear from the community about how do we reduce, how do we mitigate, how do we provide justice in the cases where there is a deadly force encounter between police and a member of our community. The Attorney General and I have been working on this working group that has 18 members, and we have had hearings in the metro area. We've had hearings in Cloquet in northern Minnesota, and we've had hearings in Mankato. We are committed to making sure that the community's voices are heard, and this is our first listening session, and I think it's appropriate that we're here in Sabathani in South Minneapolis. We will also have listening sessions in Worthington in southern Minnesota, and then we go back up to Bemidji for a northern Minnesota perspective. What I want to say to everyone that's here tonight is how appreciative we are of your time, and how appreciative we are of, especially of the family members who have come tonight to provide their testimony and to provide their insights into this. We understand that this can't be easy. We understand that every time you have to tell this story, that it is opening old wounds and making it, and it brings back a flood of memories. And for some of you, those memories are years and years in the past, and some of you, those memories are literally only months ago. But no matter how fresh or how distant the memories are, we recognize that this is a difficult process. Because of that, we have, in addition to setting up for our listening session, we've also set up a healing space so that for those of you who come tonight and whose testimony brings up pain, suffering, and sorrow, that we wanted to make sure you had a place where you could process that in a quieter place. We have 2 community healers. They are in room 218, same floor. They are not connected with the Department of Public Safety or the Attorney General's office. They are community volunteers who have volunteered to be here for the community. And they are Ms. Mack, who is the founder and director of Educational Innovation for the Black Family Blueprint, and Shondell, who is the founder and CEO of Her Silence, an organization focused on mental health and emotional well-being within the African American community. I'm going to turn this over to my co-chair, the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota, Keith Ellison, at this time.
Thank you, and I'm going to recognize our City Council Vice President, in whose ward we're in, to give us a word of opening and welcome.
Thank you, Attorney General Ellison. My name is Andrea Jenkins. I am the Vice President of the Minneapolis City Council. And I want to make sure you see our distinguished panelists who are going to listen to our stories tonight. It's really fascinating, Commissioner Harrington, that you mentioned healing, because, and I do want to say welcome to Sabathani Community Center, welcome to the 8th Ward. The Sabathani Community Center has been here for over 50 years, serving the African American community in many, many ways. And in fact, in honor of that, we just renamed 3rd Avenue Clarissa Walker Way. Clarissa Walker was one of the co-founders of the Sabathani Community Center, also mother to the first Black state representative, woman state representative in the state of Minnesota, Neva Walker. And so we wanted to honor that, but really honor the history of this community, right? And And we're thinking about how does this whole corridor become a healing corridor? Because as you mentioned, Commissioner, there's pain and trauma for the families that are dealing with this sort of trauma that comes from losing a family member to police violence, to all the violence in the street. But there is trauma in the Black community generally, right? We have been dealing with all sorts of oppressions. If anybody watched the documentary called The Jim Crow of the North, Sabantany Community Center was one of the prominent figures that played a huge role in that documentary. And the documentary talked about how Black communities have been disinvested in and shut out of various communities. And so there's deep trauma. We want to recognize this as a healing corridor. We don't want to just have a healing space. We want to have a healing place, right? So this whole corridor becomes a healing place for people to come and talk about the challenges, the injustices. Right down the street is the Kente Circle mental health facility, and we need to start talking about mental health in real ways and in our community, and so that's some of the things that we're working on in this along this corridor and at Sabantany Community Center. So I thank you for this opportunity, Attorney General Ellison. I really hope that we hear some positive solutions. I know people might want to express their pain and talk about the challenges that they have with law enforcement, but we also want to hear, what do you think about solutions to some of these really perplexing and challenging issues that we face in our community? And so I'm looking forward to listening as well. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I just want to offer a few preliminary observations. First of all, we have a task force that we have 6 people from community, we have 6 people from law enforcement. We have a Republican lawmaker, a Democratic lawmaker, House member, Senate member. We have several people who represent, various aspects of community, including mental health community and others. And we have people in different aspects of law enforcement, including prosecutors and police. We have a wide array of Minnesotans on the panel. We want to emphasize that this is one of the things we've learned is this is not an urban problem alone. In fact, most of the officer-involved shootings have happened in greater Minnesota. So we are in the heart of the city today. But we've been to Cloquet, we're going to Bemidji, we're going to Mankato, because the problem that we're dealing with tonight has been there also. I want to let you know that tonight we're going to ask you to come forward and offer your views. This is incredibly emotional stuff, so I just want to assure you that this is a safe space for you to share these ideas, where even if you tell us your personal story, what we're going to do is try to use it to build better policy going forward so that we can preserve lives. What this working group is about is preserving life. So if by chance a shooting incident were viewed, or a deadly force encounter were viewed to be within the law or outside of the law, we're concerned about both, right? Because we believe that there are techniques, strategies, and ways to make sure that police community encounters allow everybody to walk away. We believe there are strategies that we can engage in that can preserve life. So this is the kind of thing we're striving for. It's important to know that we are striving for system change. There are some horrendous cases and some very heartbreaking cases that have happened that people may want to talk about. That's fine. But I want to let you know that we're not an investigative body looking backward about some things that have happened. It's fine to talk about what has happened because it may inform the future, but that is our charge, to come up with policies and procedures and of recommendations so that we can try to do better and not repeat problems of the past. I'll say that in February, beginning of February, it's our target to have recommendations for you. We want to encourage you to make more recommendations, to make some tonight, make some online. But when we get those recommendations ready, we're going to need citizens to help us go to talk to legislators and policymakers to help get these things implemented. Once the recommendations are in place, that's not the end, that's the beginning of the next phase of this, which is to get some things implemented. And so we are going to be counting on you to help us get that done. I want you to know that we have a number of working group members. Some can be here tonight, some cannot be, but I'd like the ones who are here to be able to introduce themselves to you. So why don't you take a minute or two just to say who you are, and then we'll get started with our listening session.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Clarence Castile. I'm a civilian member of this working group. I'm also the uncle of Philando Castile, a young man who was shot and killed in July 2016 by a St. Anthony police officer in Falcon Heights. I just want to say I'm really excited to be here and see you all here willing to share your stories. As the AG was saying, we're looking for recommendations about, tell your story and just help us get these recommendations together. And everything that we come up with, the work that we're doing, is to better our society and help out our community and help out our citizens. So just step up, share your story if you can. We're here to listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Kappelhoff. I'm a judge here in Hennepin County. Prior to my appointment to the bench, I spent the bulk of my career working in the Civil Rights Division of the U.S. Department of Justice, and one of my responsibilities there was to investigate and prosecute both police practices as well as police misconduct cases. And one of the cases I oversaw was the Ferguson case in Missouri that I imagine most everyone here is familiar with. I'm heartened by a couple of things. The large turnout here, which I think is tremendous. I think speaks well of our community. And I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you and hearing your recommendations and your suggestions for solutions, because we do this together. This is an effort. It's a collaborative effort. It's an open process. We're trying to be as transparent as we can be, and we look forward to hearing your recommendations, your solutions, and from you we will learn how we can go forward and we can best serve the community. So thank you all for being here, and I look forward to listening to you.
Thank you. My name is Mark Rubin. I'm the St. Louis County Attorney from Duluth, and it's just a real honor to be here. I've been a prosecutor since 1978. I've reviewed quite a number of officer-involved shooting cases. I've prosecuted officers. It's a privilege to be a part of this working group. And some of you that I've been able to meet and listen to already, you've changed my life, okay? And you've helped me understand things better. And I'm hoping because of that, I can be part of the solution with this incredible group that the Commissioner and the Attorney General have put together. So thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. And thank you for what you're about to provide for us.
So I do want to encourage folks to come on up. There's the microphone right there. I want to encourage you to share your thoughts. If you don't feel comfortable talking, you can submit your ideas online. You can submit them in writing. I also want to acknowledge the presence of our elected officials. I thought I saw Park Board member Londell French here. So Londell's there. County Attorney Mike Freeman's here, right there. If there's somebody else here who you have voted into office, I don't see him, so please stand up if you're in the house. Okay, seeing none, that's good. So now, look, the door is open for you. As you share your reflections, I ask you to keep in mind that there might be other people behind you who also want to talk. So, Al, you're up first, but give me 1 second. So let me just say, we want to hear from you. We do. But if you start getting on into the lengthy range, I would like to be empowered, along with my co-chair, to ask you to bring it to a point, because we want everybody we can to get their say-so in.
Can we put like a time limit or something like that?
I was just suggested that we have a time limit. What do you all think about a time limit? Yeah, it's a good idea. Okay, so what time limit should we have? 3 minutes. Okay, so 3 minutes.
3 minutes for community, 5 minutes for families.
Well, so let's just have one time limit so it's easier. What about 4 minutes? All right, I'm hearing 5 minutes. Any objection to 5 minute time limit? Okay, so we're gonna have 5 minute, clap your hands if you're for 5 minutes. Now, will you clap your hands to empower us co-chairs to enforce the 5 minute rule? Okay, so with that, let me recognize our first speaker, Mr. Al Flowers.
One quick, just housekeeping point here. As we have done for all of our hearings, to make sure that we are being as transparent as possible, we are videotaping all of our hearings. And so there has been video of every hearing from beginning to end. And so I just want folks to know that we are videoing tonight, and that is going to be, it's basically being live streamed, so that if anybody that couldn't be here tonight wants to know what was said and they want to hear your comments, they will have that opportunity also.
Yeah, thank you. First, let me thank Commissioner Harrington and Attorney General Ellison for coming and doing this in our community. I'm a South Side resident. They think I'm a North Sider, but this is where I've been a long time. And to the rest of the panel. And I'm not going to even take 5 minutes. That's interesting. I can get this out and say I'm a father that lost his daughter to gun violence. It wasn't gun violence by police, but it was gun violence. And I want to say, I think I'm working on some with over 25 organizations, and it's called Minnesota Safe Street. And I'm trying to bring our communities from Minneapolis to St. Paul to Brooklyn, where you going at. I've met with Assistant Commissioner Hodges. He was in the room. I didn't, I don't know if he left, but Assistant Commissioner was in the room. They didn't give him no recognition. Is he still here? Oh, he stepped out. So yeah, but we've been working with him. And one of the things I'm trying to do with Safe Street is make sure that when we're going through these conversations that you're having, Commissioner and Attorney General, that we don't jeopardize our young kids with this tragedy that's going on around the country with violence by police. And I don't want my kid. This is why I'm working on this. I don't want my grandkids or kids, I don't want them to be on the side of, I gotta hate the police, or which way it go, even though I've had several incidents with the police. And if you know me, you'll know that. You can Google it, you'll find out I've been through that. But I think our community about criminal justice reform and justice reform, Mr. Attorney General, in the county attorney's office, and county attorney's office all over the state, how we are being treated in our community. I'm speaking as an African-American descendant of the slave, how we are being treated. And then when incidents happen, I've been around when Thurman Blevins got killed, several incidents with police that could have spiraled out of control and started riots and things like that. And I watched that, and I watch how things go when it goes to law enforcement to investigate. And we'll accept it if it's right. But when you have a county attorney, I'm gonna speak up on Officer Noor. When the officer, no police officer ever got charged in this county, in Hennepin County, never got charged with murdering somebody until it was a black officer. And then then he gets charged, he gets beat up, he's called with a depraved mind. And so County Attorney Mike Freeman can sit here, but you call the man, he had a depraved mind. You went into it like you was in his head. And that's how we get treated as African Americans. I just want to talk to my people for a minute. That's how we get treated as African Americans, and they'll do it, but they never charge any white officer, never said anything negative in the newspaper about him, and whether I'm not saying guilt or innocent, I'm saying what they did to him, how they did him. They never do a white officer like that, and that's how we got treated. So we must stand together. I'm asking African Americans to stand with us with Minnesota Safe Street as we continue this fight. We got something going good here with our community, but we're gonna have to fight the municipality, whether it's city, county, state, and say we're gonna tell you what we're gonna do for our community. You can't tell us no more. Whether we're down by the hands of the police or down by the hands of our own, they can't tell us what to do. We continue to do it. So I hope the Attorney General and Commissioner hear what I'm saying. It's both ways. We got to make sure that what we want our kids, the police ain't going nowhere. They're not going anywhere. They're not. You can do all that, and I don't want them to go nowhere. If you in the areas where we be fighting for our people, you wouldn't be saying what you're saying if you looking at dead bodies, whether it's about the police or about our own hands. So I just want the Attorney General to know we fighting, and I've said this to him. We are fighting. We want to work with the public safety, law enforcement. We want to work together with it, but you got to make us an equal partner. And I'm talking about people that look like me. You got to make us an equal partner. You can't say every time we ask for something we begging. No, we not. They'll challenge us about $100,000, but they get some people, communities spend $25 million over, $20 million over, and they ain't say nothing, and they gonna get away with it. But they'll challenge you if you're African American. Quit letting them do it. Quit letting them do it. Let's come together. Let's not let them do it again. We got an Attorney General here. We got a Commissioner in Harrington. We got a Chief and Chief Arredondo that I believe we can work miracles out if we come together, quit backbiting, because they want us to keep fighting and keep going in the circle. Is it my 5 up? You got 15 seconds. I got 15 seconds. I know you gonna cut. Yeah, he done rigged the clock on me. I know that, you know. But hey, I thank y'all, and I hope you laughed. But I hope you heard what I said. And let's come together. Listen to us for Minnesota Safe Street. We're gonna come together. We're gonna fight this battle. I know this is a battle for all the people that lost somebody. I'm so sad for you. I lost my daughter. I know that it feels some kind of way. It don't matter who killed them. They killed my daughter for nothing, and she lost all her life. And Congressman Ellison knows my daughter very well, and he knows my daughter. So thank you, and let's fight together. Let's try to see what we can do to make things better for our life all over the state of Minnesota. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Elena Ramadan, and I appreciate us having this listening session. I actually wanted to talk about what he said, so he must have felt my spirit about Officer Noor. But I guess my question is, where's the accountability? I mean, if we have officials making statements about what people's intent is and making comments when cases are still pending and sentencing is still happening, what is the accountability? The accountability for Officer Noor is he's in prison now. In fact, it was so bad for him that he had to go to another state because they had him locked up for 23 out of 24 hours. Now, how do you treat somebody like that? And he was a police officer. So I guess my question is, what's the accountability for our county attorney? If he says something that I feel is obstruction of justice, who's holding him accountable? Who's his boss? I mean, 1 minute he's taking a leave of absence, and then he's back and it's like, what happened? So, I mean, I'm really wondering, what is the procedure going forward? I think instead of having one person decide where the charges, there should be a panel of people deciding if there's going to be charges. And all the officers should have to go through that process. It shouldn't be like, okay, well, you're going to be going through the process. You're going to be charged. And even the degrees, I mean, how do you charge somebody a year later, a third-degree charge of murder, and you really can't prove it because based on what I heard in the court, it wasn't even valid. So I guess my question is, how are we going to hold people like the county attorney responsible, and when is that going to start?
Thank you.
I'd like to say, first of all, my name is Kelvin, spelled with a K, last name Lee. And I came here because I had an incident that happened to me, and was nothing done about it. And I don't see how that officer got away with it. On May the 30th, 2014, I was assaulted by an officer. I was assaulted by that officer for, I believe that because he was angry for chasing me. At that time, I was an addict. I was in the midst of buying some drugs. When him and at least 4 cars pulled up before the transaction, I saw them and I started running. I couldn't run far or fast. So when I got so far down the street, I stopped running and threw my hands up. When he got to me, he tackled me, grabbed me around my neck, threw me down, and started choking me. At that time, I was trying to tell him that I couldn't breathe, that he was choking me, and that I couldn't. And he whispered in my ear, "Don't you know I can kill you from running from me?" Then he flipped me around and started putting me in a chokehold. I saw his other hand grabbed his wrist and started squeezing tight around my neck until I passed out. I don't know how long I was unconscious, but when I came to, I saw that I had urinated on myself. After a while, I was taken to the hospital and released. I was never charged with a crime. I had no drugs on me, and was caught with none. And I was never charged. I went to the government center and picked up a letter for a court date. That letter was never sent to where I recommended it be sent to. So I felt that they tried to set me up for a warrant to be put out on me. So I ended up going to court. Now my question is, how can the city and state get away with charging me for a crime when I wasn't put through due process? I wasn't booked, fingerprinted. I wasn't read my rights. I was never arrested. I was injured physically and mentally by this incident, and I received nothing or no compensation for it. How and why these police officers can get away with the dirt that they do when they do wrong for the things that they do to any of us. Now I live with pain in my neck. My knees went through a long healing process, and I suffer from PTSD. PTSD is something that nobody wants to suffer for. Now, I'm not saying that all police officers are like that one, but they need to do something about the ones that are bad to the community. And I'm saying this because should nobody have to go through nothing like that, and the city should never have really charged me for a crime that I didn't commit. And I was forced to plead guilty. You know, they sent me back and forth to court for a year and a half before I pled guilty because, and at that time I was really going through a healing from the mental aspect of the situation. You know, I'm surprised and glad and grateful that I'm alive today, you know, so I can get this out in the community to let it be known. And the city itself should have never agreed to charging me for a crime that I didn't commit. And they knew I didn't have no drugs on me, and I wasn't caught with any. It's sad that they do us any kind of way. You know, it's sad that they treat us like we don't know nothing. And for the state to put they piece in it and not charge that officer. And it's wrong for that too. I'd just like to know what the city can, they need to screen these officers a lot more better before they put them out there on the streets. Okay.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Don Williams. I'm Brian Quinones' grandfather. And what happened with us, with Brian, woke me up. I read an article a little while ago about being a passive ally. I sat on my hands, and I agreed with what I'm hearing here, but I didn't do anything and I didn't say anything about it. So, and I think a lot of that is, I have a question. How do you take these stories, how do you take what's happening in this community and get it out to people who are anesthetized to the fact that the police are going to protect them forever and they don't know or they aren't willing to accept what happens to families? How do you get this to people who, good Lord willing, don't have to go through what we've gone through to wake some of other people up? So there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way that white people who don't live in these communities, I don't like using race, but let's face it, it's race. Okay? How do we get white people that don't live in these communities to say, there's a problem? Okay? I've heard mention of panels. Who sits on these panels? I mean, you told me who's on your panel now. I also firmly believe that it's a systemic issue here. I don't believe cops can investigate cops. I'm sorry, that's just me. And I'm pretty sure that's other people. I don't believe that. Okay? They get done with their investigation, who does it go to? More law enforcement. Where does the voice of the people enter into what happens here? Okay? Where does my granddaughter have a say in what happens here? Okay? Other people have to be involved. This is the first time I've seen Tashira. I know Tashira because of Ashley. I know Tashira's story. Okay? Mr. Castillo? All right. I'm sorry I was one of those passive allies, but I'm clearly woke. Okay? So it needs to get a bigger voice. It needs to be heard somewhere else. You can go to your legislatures all day long, and when you get to that point, just let me know, because I'm there. Okay? It needs to be heard by people outside of this room. It needs to be heard by people outside of this community. There is a systemic issue. There is a problem with the way police handle these situations, because it makes no common sense to me the way this happens and continues to happen over and over and over again. I don't understand after what happened with Brian, and we haven't resolved, so I'm not going there, but a white man takes police on a chase, shoots at them, and gets arrested. It's in the news. A white woman attacks a police officer with a screwdriver. He disarms her with that. She stabs him with a knife. She gets arrested. Okay? A person of color gets pulled over, is sitting in a car, explaining something, and gets shot. I don't get it. That's not common sense. This has to get louder. It has to get bigger. How do you do that? A lot of people that are going to hear this or that don't hear this don't think there's an issue. They blame the victim. Okay? Folks, we got to get this outside of here. And people that are passive allies that sit on their hands need to get active. And it shouldn't take a family member getting killed to wake everybody up. And I regret not making a move until my grandson got killed. This needs to be bigger, and it needs to be loud. And we need people like you gentlemen to be a voice. We don't need politicians that will put us on an agenda and let us sit there. We need politicians that will be active and make it work. And will take a serious stand. And I'm willing to do whatever I can do. Because there's a 30-year-old man who has a 12-year-old son, and I don't want that 12-year-old son to be a statistic down the road because he hates cops. Yep.
Hello, everybody. I'm Austin Heisler. On August 31st, 2019, approximately 4:37, my 21-year-old nephew, Kobe Heisler, was shot and killed by the Brooklyn Center Police right in front of my mother. He was known as loving, kind, smart, funny, just a kind soul, and he meant everything to my son. He was my son's cousin, and he also was on the autism spectrum. My mom witnessed the whole thing. He was unarmed. I'm not looking for, I have some questions, but I know they're not going to get answered. But we're sitting here 97 days later today, and all 4 cops that were involved had cop cams on, and the BCA is still to this day investigating the incident. Under further investigation and contact at the police station, though, all 4 of those cops now are back on duty. Even though the BCA is not, we're just sitting in a fog. And every day my son asks me, has the BCA contacted you guys? Have they released the investigation? And they haven't. And every day, he weeps. And it's just so baffling that I don't have an answer for him. I just keep telling him I don't know. Because I can't offer him up a generic answer for what is going on. But my question is how, and we've looked into some of these police officers that are involved, and one of them, Cody Turner, still has a case pending from 2 years ago of a wrongful death case. And I just want to know how these cops, when they're involved in a deadly shooting like this, can be allowed back on force. Because my parents, I live 5 miles away, but now that my nephew is in there living with them to be the caretaker, I'm almost got to go there every day. But I mean, I go out of my way just to barely get into that city so I can just do a couple blocks because I don't want to run into them cops. And I've never had a problem with cops, and neither has my son. But now recently we are scared, and we love the city of Brooklyn Center, but now we don't even go in there, and we're missing out on a lot of things. And my question is, we're just baffled that these cops are back on duty when we're sitting here waiting for answers. And we can't get any answers, and we're talking almost 100 days, and that's all I got to say.
Hello. How's it going? My name is Noah McCord, and I'm a disability advocate. And I just wanted to bring to light a piece of the conversation that's not often talked about in the conversation on police brutality, and that is that 54% of the individuals who are shot annually by law enforcement are folks with disabilities. Specifically here in Minnesota, an issue that's very near and dear to my heart, being on the autism spectrum, is the fact that Minnesota has the 2nd highest autism prevalence rate in the entire nation. And we have had multiple incidents all across the state where children with autism are getting dragged out of school in handcuffs, children with autism are being accosted by law enforcement, children with fetal alcohol syndrome at age 10 or 11 are ending up in Rochester Juvenile Facility when they're not even supposed to take people under the age of 12. Sorry, I have to look at my bullet points. Kids with autism are 7% more likely to be charged with the crime without having any sort of intent to cause that crime. If we look at what if you look at a list of what law enforcement is told to look for on autism, and you look at a list of what they're told to look for of someone who's chemically dependent, it's like the exact same list. It's the glossed over eyes, it's whatever it is, and every single time, like slam dunk, every single time, and I'm so sick of hearing about it, is every single time the excuse is, oh, well, we thought he was drunk or high, and they never test. How do you know if he was drunk or high? One prime example that actually happened while Commissioner Harrington was the Metro Transit Police Chief is there was a young man was going home on the light rail with his family, young African-American male, also on the autism spectrum. The cops showed up and they told them to stop horsing around with the light rail. People with autism oftentimes take longer to follow directions. But that doesn't work with law enforcement because you're just expected to do it now because otherwise you're going to get shot at. And they ended up tackling him, and it was a full fight or flight response. They injured him. He had like a seizure to the point where they had to take him to the ER. And in that instance, there was some level of accountability for the officer, but it continues to be an issue. One of the things I think it's worth noting on this particular issue is there is a training protocol on this issue that Minnesota actually developed. And we have had this training protocol around for years. It's called CARE, Cop Autism Response Education Training. It was actually developed in coordination with what they call the Vitals app. It's like an app for a phone. You can put in what your diagnosis is or triggers and yada yada. And when a cop comes within a certain vicinity, they will have access to that information. I'm not going to sit here and say that's the panacea. I don't use it because I have a tendency to piss people off, and so I don't use it. But I also want to just sit here and say that this training protocol has been in the legislature for the past 5 sessions. We've gotten stonewalled in the Senate repeatedly. Even though we've gotten hearings, it's just not getting anywhere. And I've met with the Minnesota Sheriff's Association, I've met with the Minnesota Chiefs, I've met with the Post Board, I've met with the AG's office, I've met with DPS, and every single year we end up coming back to the legislature. And I actually want to recognize the family of Kobe Heisler, who's in the back of the room. 97 days ago was the first time that someone with autism has actually been shot. We've had assaults, we've had confrontation, we've had invalid arrests, but we've never had a shooting. And so as far as this hearing, I just want to say that it's really one thing to come up here and have a hearing and have a listening session, and that's fine and wonderful, and no disrespect, but I'm just wondering if we're going to see the same commitment as far as the next legislative session. Are the changes in this report actually going to be followed through on? Is DPS going to back them? Is the AG going to back them? And are we going to have some very serious conversations with the legislature to make sure that these things are followed through on? So, because we really need to stop offering up human sacrifices. That's basically what we're doing here. So, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Stacy Gurian Sherman. I'm a resident of Minneapolis, and I'm here to tell you, in all honesty, I have more faith that Republicans in Congress will be patriotic rather than political and vote for articles of impeachment and convictions than this work group will come up with any meaningful reforms on police misconduct and killings. And that is because this working group is stacked with prosecutors and police officers, and the remainder of the seats are for people who have never done any work in activism or advocacy for police accountability. So this is a complete sham. I'm a 62-year-old white woman, and I have seen for my whole life blue ribbon commissions and working groups in Detroit, where I grew up, in Oakland, California, where I lived, in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore area where I lived. And we are tired of talking and not hearing you listen. There is 40 years of commissions and research that tells you what you need to do. And instead of implementing things, you're having these listening sessions. How many people have been murdered by the police since this commission started? If it's one, and it's been more than that, it's way too many. And the farce of this working group starts with your name. You have a 10-syllable phrase, police-involved deadly force encounters. Well, I will tell you, all you need is a 4-syllable phrase, police murders. That is the reality. And I am here to say that we have already presented to you recommendations that this state, Minnesota, and commissions and research, academic groups all over the country have recommended. And we presented these to you, and I'm going to read them out loud here, because even though you may not listen and take them in, the people in this group will. So we came up with 9 recommendations, and I'm going to challenge each of you on this working group to tell me and the rest of us why these recommendations are not going to be supported. I want specific details on that. And the first one is immediately implement an independent state agency to investigate deadly force incidents and prosecute the law enforcement involved. The BCA is nothing but a rubber stamp and an excuse to justify police murders. Second, we must end fear-based military-style warrior training and significantly increase the amount of de-escalation training through statewide policy, legislation, and post-board requirements. I am old enough to remember the Vietnam War, and this warrior training was implemented during Vietnam. It is what resulted in the My Lai massacre and all sorts of other massacres. We have people going into the military and coming into our police force and treating our communities of color as enemy combatants. And that is the reality. I, as a white woman of privilege, live in a parallel universe. I don't have to fear walking out on the street and getting stopped and frisked and murdered for things that other people in this room have to deal with. The third one is calls for community members suffering a mental health crisis or wellness checks must be responded to by experienced, sensitive, qualified, professional mental health workers, not police officers. We have to require annual in-person mental health training provided by proven, experienced, and respected mental health experts from the local community instead of current ineffective crisis intervention training and CIT. We have to have enforcement of discipline and prosecution of law enforcement who engage in excessive force, because we know for a fact that in Minneapolis and St. Paul, all over the state, all over this country, we have police officers, had they been prosecuted, they would have been out of the police force, they would have been out of the business of murdering people. And we have police that continue on these forces. It's inexcusable. We have to have annual and required in-person anti-oppressant training conducted by private and community-based organizations that represent people from oppressed groups, not people who look like me. All law enforcement agencies must conduct mandatory psychiatric tests of their officers every 3 years after critical incidences involving police shootings, after deadly force incidents, and when transferring to different police departments within the state. We have to require the release of unedited video footage to families of people killed by law enforcement officers within 48 hours of the fatal incident, body cams, dash cams, everything else. And we must reopen all of the BCA and county prosecutors' fatal law enforcement murders and killings because they have been pushed under the rug. We are not waiting for you. We formed a group here in Minneapolis called Minneapolis for a Better Police contract. And based on a lot of these recommendations, we came up with recommendations, and we are meeting with every member of the city council in Minneapolis, and I am so proud to say they have been incredibly supportive and receptive to us. We have included 3 priorities and many more, but first is elimination of officer fatigue. Currently, per the contract, there are no limitations on the number of hours worked. This should be standard throughout Minnesota, and it should be in your report. The second is mandatory mental health screenings, and the third is more flexible staffing so that we don't have to keep hiring people for jobs that we have. So I am challenging each of you on this working group, and I'm going to leave these with you, and I will be following up by mail and email to say why it is these recommendations are not going to be part of your report, why they're not going to be in there, because I have little faith that they will. So I'm challenging you to talk back to us and put your money where your mouth is.
My name is Tashira Garraway, and I am the fiance and also the mother of Justin Tigan, 13-year-old son. Justin Tigan was pulled over 2009 and chased down and beaten brutally by the St. Paul police and thrown in a dumpster. John Chief Harrelson was the chief of police at the time. For some reason, we have a video that's edited for Justin Tigan's case. A video that I've seen that blanks out when they catch Justin. Justin had dog bites all over his body. His skull was cracked in half. His eyes were big. It was a clear beating that took place. Here is Justin's body found in a dumpster or found in a live waste management after the St. Paul police brutally beat him. This is what they're doing to our black men in the community, our minority men, and they're walking free. I'm quite sure that some of the murders that have continued was because the officers were still on the force and allowed to still be on the force. This is Justin's face. So what we're looking for is accountability. There's no healing when the killers are still out there. That's like a woman getting raped and the rapist is still out there. How do you expect her to heal? How do you expect the community to heal if the officers are still out there to kill more people? To brutalize the community more and more and more. And then after they murder our loved ones, I forgot to mention that they sat outside my home, sat outside my mother-in-law's home, sat outside and watched his little brothers and sisters play outside, followed me to the store with my son in the car. We're not waiting anymore. I'm not gonna keep coming telling my story over and over and over, because that's traumatizing. They're not about to keep doing this shit. And if something don't happen, it's gonna be a war in Minnesota. Because if they come to my house fucking with me, they gonna get what the fuck they came for. I'm sick of this shit. I have a 13-year-old son. Nobody deserves to be in a trash can. And I'm gonna tell you something. Behind your suits, when you take that off, your life is the same value as that man that ended up in that trash can. Your life is no more valuable because you wear that suit and hold these positions. Those officers were supposed to be fired. They were supposed to be in jail and prosecuted. And instead they've been promoted. I'm up here because this needs to get heard. What they're doing to our people, they've been very strategic at keeping these stories hidden and swept under the rug. Everybody needs to hear what's happening to our people. This is a modern day hate crime. This is the 2009 Emmett Till. We have to come together as a people, even the activists. We got to stop arguing with one another. There's families that's literally in pain, and there is no healing until these cases are opened back up and these people are prosecuted and off of the force. Period.
Good afternoon, distinguished panel and all the guests in here. My name is Trent Cruz. I just recently got elected to be one of the co-chairs of the Green Party of the United States into a reparations working group. So I want to say something to when we get put in positions, especially those of us who are American descendants of slavery, if we're there and then we don't do nothing when we see racism, or we just sit there and let we actually implement white supremacy and institutional racism, then we're useless. Because I've advocated for some of our elected officials to be elected. So we're vouching for you. And we're like, we're saying, we're putting you in position not just to be, there's no use to having a black elected official or a black chief of police or a black fire chief if you're not going to do nothing for the American descendants of slavery. My sister Delshia's son was found dead in Beltrami County Jail last year. This is I'm not going to veer off too much or talk about it too long, but he died from neglect and abuse. Beltrami County came back with a report, Department of Corrections came back with a report, but it's the same thing that's been happening for 6,000 years. When Cain killed Abel, God asked him, where's your brother? And then he said, am I my brother's keeper? And then the police come to us and talk about community policing and brotherhood and sisterhood, but they don't want to offer us genuine brotherhood. Because if you wanted to offer us genuine brotherhood, you wouldn't throw us in the trash can. You wouldn't allow the police to kill us and allow them to cover it up. We look up to you sometimes even. So my sister came and showed Mr. Ellison, somebody that I admire, showed you the footage in April or May, and then she never heard back from you. And I'm like, are you sure? We ain't talking about Keith. Man, he's gonna do something about this if you get a chance to talk to him. So when we get in these positions, especially those of us who are American descendants of slavery, if you went through, if your ancestors went through slavery, if your ancestors went through sharecropping, your ancestors went through the lynching period, your ancestors went through the crack cocaine period, and you don't do nothing when you get elected or hired to a position of power, you are useless to us. So once we got the footage back, we were able to see that they lied. They let him lay on the floor for 8 hours and just watched him die. Didn't take him to the medical, and they lied about it. And that's the same thing that the police do. They lie about it and they cover it up. Like Cain tried to cover up 6,000 years ago when he killed his brother. So, so we want to change some of the policies and procedures. So when a police officer kills somebody, they get 48 hours to get their story straight. If Lil Junebug kills somebody, he don't get time to change up his story. So, and I remember seeing things where the Ku Klux Klan called you a terrorist. Bob K.K. Crow called our Attorney General a terrorist. So you should be more adamant about getting full and complete justice. Another thing that we need to have is, I know you said this isn't it isn't an investigative body, but we need an investigative body. We need to have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission like they had in South Africa. And we need to go back at least to 1986. Oh, brother, I'm not even at 3 minutes yet. But I'm sorry, I'm not trying to attack you, brother, my fault. We want to go back and investigate any police involved shooting that happened since 1986. And the last thing I'm gonna say is when the brother got killed in Texas, the judge came and gave his killer a hug. But we don't get hugs. And we just get thrown into jail and that's it. But I know my time is up, I guess. So I'm gonna let the next person speak. Thank you.
I'm here today to support that brother right there, Kira. I've heard their stories, and just to hear their stories is heartbreaking. It makes you want to cry. How can you dispose of somebody in a dumpster? Come on, serial killers don't even do that shit. And here's another part of it. The police officers are supposed to protect our community. But if they're doing criminal stuff, and they're getting time to get the story together, shutting off the body cam, so you can't see it, you can't witness it, it's a murder. My understanding of the law is that murder is never closed. The case is still open. People have to look at that. I remember when I was doing dirt, and I went to DOC, I did it a long time. We used to say our war is not going to stop until theirs stop. You know? You're talking about snitching and all of that? Who could break to the code of blue? You tell them one of the police officers, they're going to pop you. They're not going to come when you need help. Right. They're going to make sure that you get killed just because you're trying to do the right thing. Right. The law is clear about these things. Right. Anybody should have known, had reason to know. It's held accountable for that. But we're not applying it like that. They say Minnesota nice. How nice is it when you're killing us? Right. You're killing us and you're not letting us come forward and say nothing. Right. You're rubber stamping that. Well, you know, we thought we seen this and we thought we seen that, so we had to pop him. Come on, where's the training at? You're doing military training for inner city. Right. We got gun things up on the towers to hear gunshots. You know, so imagine what our neighborhood looks like on the 4th of July, New Year's. You know what I'm telling you? Why? Why are we held hostage in our own community? Why? I understand the law is for lawbreakers. It shouldn't be applied to everybody. Everybody is not undecent. Everybody is not unclean. A lot of people in this room go to work every day. They pay their taxes. They're law-abiding. If they can help, they're going to help. But why should they be held hostage? I got to tell my sons and daughters, my grandkids, this is the way you got to behave when the police pull you over. No sudden jerky movements. No smart-ass comments. Keep your hand where they can see them. I even raise my hand. When they stop me for a traffic, I go, come on. It's just a traffic ticket. It's not, you know, but I don't want to die. I don't want to die. And I have to tell my people that stuff, keep them alive. After all is said and done, it starts in that White House. If the man in the White House ain't right, we ain't going to be right. Now, take that where you want to take that. You know, we're going to have to do something here on a ground level thing. Keith, you're a decent person. I know that for a fact. Chief Arizondo's a decent person. I know that for a fact. I know his family. You know what I mean? It's a political position. These things have got to be done politically. But we got to start putting the money where it's supposed to be at. More police officers, what? To kill me, shoot me, kill my people? White privilege, where does that come in at? You know? If this stuff was going on in Edina, Minnetonka, Hawkins, Plymouth, you think they're going to stand still for that? Come on, we still got people in our neighborhood doing things on right on the street corners. And they're right along with the police. Come on, Keith. Something got to be done about this. Somebody's got to say enough is enough. You know? Think about what happens to you. Like Elder Davis said, they'll be for me in the daytime, but they'll be coming for you at night.
Hi. I'm going to turn this that way because I'm afraid you guys already know what I have to say. But my name is Emma Peterson, and I was a Minneapolis Police Explorer for 5.5 years. So for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a youth program for kids who are interested in law enforcement. So I was in that program for 5.5 years in Minneapolis. I worked my way up until I was the captain of my program. And I left because I was harassed and retaliated by members of the Minneapolis Police Department. I still want to be a police officer, but I thought I'd share with you some of the things that they train us to do that they don't want to tell you about. So in one of the scenarios that we practice for, there's something called a shoot, don't shoot simulator. So it's like a video game. You have a screen in front of you, you're given a gun, which is like one of those laser pointing guns, and you run through a simulation. So let's say it's a traffic stop. There's somebody in the car, you walk up to the car like a normal routine traffic stop. All of a sudden, somebody pulls out a weapon, and you have to decide if you're going to use deadly force or not. So when I went through those simulations, I tried to de-escalate. I tried to talk the person through calming down, back up, create cover and distance, but I was disqualified and marked off for doing de-escalation techniques because it was more prioritized that you keep your officer's safety and you use deadly force. So those are the types of things that they are teaching youth who want to be law enforcement. And kids in those programs are as young as 14 years old, and they're being trained in shoot, don't shoot simulations. Another thing is that there's a big stink in Minneapolis right now about those 1,700 untested rape kits. So I will say that there is a rape culture in police departments. When I went on a ride-along, when I was probably around 15 or 16 years old, I was in the back seat of a squad car. We were responding to a sexual assault in Minneapolis. And the female officer in the squad car looks back at me and she says, "Most women are lying. Most of them make these up." Then I had to sit in the back of that squad car with a woman who had just been assaulted as she cried while we went to HCMC. And I had to sit there knowing that those police officers didn't believe them. One other thing, my last comment that I'll make, is that it is extremely hard to get officers held accountable for even harassment made on kids in their youth program. So how can we expect them to hold officers accountable for shooting people? I have complaints going from when I was still in the program in 2017 that have been going on for about 2 years now, and they still have not been completed their investigations. My sister, who was also in the program with me, was harassed and retaliated after that. I still want to be a police officer, but I will be a good police officer and not the type that these men stand for. And I agree with Stacy that nothing will happen from this working commission, but I think it's a value for all of you to know, especially those attorneys in here who are sitting and listening to this, the realities of police departments, because they're not going to be true to what they're doing, because they'll harass and retaliate people like me who ask too many questions. So that's all I have to say.
My name is Dave Bicking from Minneapolis. I'll just start with one obvious suggestion, and that is that the BCA should not be investigating the police. They should not be investigating the fatal shootings or even the non-fatal shootings. Communities United Against Police Brutality that I've been working with has examined some of the files coming from the BCA. We've looked at the Jamar Clark file, the Thurman Blevins file, the Cordell Handy file, and we'll be looking at more. The BCA, as indicated by these files, is either grossly biased or grossly incompetent, probably both. The files are organized in such a way that they can be of no use to a county attorney. There is no organization, no table of contents, no index, nothing that would help somebody make sense of the actual case, and we have verified that this is the status of the files as they're received by the county attorneys. But I don't have much hope that you'll take this recommendation because I think you are not really here to hear and consider our suggestions. From the beginning of this working group, you have shut out the community and shut out advocates for reforms. The composition of the group is a pretty good indication of that, stacked mostly with law enforcement and with people who represent the status quo in this state. The people who are responsible for representing and supervising the perpetrators of the deadly force we're talking about. Nearly all of the working group have created the status quo and are not the people who should be making the changes. The panels that you've heard from have been mostly the same sort of composition. For instance, the panels regarding the BCA have just had one member, Drew Evans, the head of the BCA. I don't think he's going to be very critical of that organization. So, and looking just at the agenda of the first session, it's a long meeting. And at the end, after almost 8 hours, is the time for some public comment. So this has been set up to shut out the public from the beginning so that you can do what you had planned to do and possibly make some changes that protect the status quo, but nothing that will hurt the status quo. Now you have a listening session. This listening session was never in the original plan or in the press release or any of that. We know that the original intention and motivation was to shut out the public. I wish I could believe that now you've changed, but I think you have the same motivation and intention that you started with several months ago. And so this listening session is window dressing. It's to appear that you are listening to us. That doesn't mean that the testimony here, which has been powerful, and I just so appreciate the people who have come out here, with the exception of this panel. And I think that testimony is nevertheless important, whether it's going to be really heard by this panel, because we need to organize to make our own reality and make our own reforms. It's not going to come from this group. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dini, and I'm the younger brother of Isaac Aiden, who was shot and killed by 5 officers in Eagan, Minnesota on July 2nd. I'm not really here to talk about Isaac's story because Isaac's story is just another story with a different name. I'm here to talk about the bigger issue here in Minnesota. So since the year 2000, there have been over 250 officer-involved incidents where it led to the death of a civilian. Over 400. Over 400? Over 400 since the year of 2000. So to this day, I still haven't met a family who has been treated with respect. And throughout all those incidents, there's only one officer who's been prosecuted and convicted. So out of 400 incidents, only one officer was guilty. That math doesn't even add up. And there's clear evidence provided that's the body cameras show everything, and we still can't get justice. So it's clear that we need a different method of prosecution. We need to hold these officers accountable. There needs to be transparency. And we've been saying that at every single session of this working group. But today I want to talk about something different. When an officer dies, there is a memorial that's held. He is honored. He's respected for all the things he's accomplished in his career. But when a civilian dies, he's portrayed in the media as a criminal, regardless of what he did. Whether he was armed, unarmed, he's treated as a criminal. And one thing that I've just noticed is every single family involved in this incident feels like it's them against the officers. So when we think about these incidents, we always think about huge legislative changes and things we can do. But the first step, one thing that we can change and implement tomorrow is by treating victims with respect.
Right.
So, one thing that we can change and implement tomorrow is by treating victims with respect. So, one thing that we can change and implement tomorrow is by treating victims with respect.
Right. 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 Right.
it doesn't take a legislative change for the involved police department to go visit the family, have the chiefs, and just talk to them about what happened. How many family members are finding out their loved ones are killed on TV? That's the last form of source that you need to hear that your brother, your cousin, your father, your dad just died. So the very first step is just having police departments be respectful and actually go visit the family. Multiple families have to jump through hoops just to get in contact with the people involved in their loved one's murder. Another thing I've noticed is when an officer is in an involved incident or any incident at all, they have multiple resources. When we look at police brutality and police murders, we always think about the victim. But it's sad to say the victim is gone, but now the family, the brothers, the sisters, the mothers, and the fathers, those are the people who are going through it. So I'm not seeing anything to provide resources, therapy, counseling at all to the community. There's multiple resources for police officers. And all I'm hearing is, how can we make police officers better? Where can we put the money to make sure our police officers are getting the best therapy, best treatment, but we're not doing that for the victims. So what I would like to see is some sort of organization that works with victims, regardless of the outcome, regardless of the incident, because at the end of the day, whoever was shot and killed, that's your loved one. No matter what they did, they're still your loved one. Justified or not, there has to be things for the community to ensure that they're healthy mentally and just people to work with them throughout this process. And what was I going to say? I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, we just need more resources and we need to just treat our community, because this situation goes outside of just the victim or just the families, because this causes a traumatic experience on the whole community. There's people that have to drop out of their schools. So I can keep on naming the list, but we just need to take care of our community and have officers act like officers and just show the families some sort of kind gesture, because the families feel like it's us versus them. And that just continues a generation of hate against officers, and we're not going to go nowhere with that. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ashley Quinones. I am the wife of Brian Quinones. He was just murdered September 7th by 5 officers in Richfield, Minnesota. There's so many issues with Minnesota alone and their way of policing. So I have a list. I'm going to go through it as quick as I can. I don't know another profession that they're allowed to basically be afraid of the community that they're supposed to be taking care of. I don't see nurses arresting and beating up their psychotic clients in their profession. I don't see that happening. So I don't understand how nurses can de-escalate with no tools to harm anybody and take people down when these are the exact people that the police are killing in the street. So I think that one of the things you guys should work on is emerging these cowardice police officers into the communities, into the shelters, into the mental health crisis centers, and emerging them into all of the where are the thugs and gangbangers and everywhere that they're afraid of, that they can still understand that they are humans and learn how to actually treat them like they're the citizens they're supposed to protect. I have the same amount of schooling as officers do, but I chose business instead of policing. So I'm confused as to how, in my profession, I'm not allowed to sexually harass or racially profile or do any of the things that police get away with in their profession. I would be fired immediately. But I don't kill anyone and still I could lose my job. I don't believe that in a state that there is no death penalty, that any crime should warrant the death penalty. And a lot of the night crew, which is usually when they say it's the most active. I've talked to multiple police officers that say they actually prefer the night shift if they want more action in the night. Why are they most likely rookies then with hardly any seasoned vets? Because it's more of a seniority-based order on how they get their schedules. So then the ones that have been there the longest, that have done all this and have the most experience, become day shift. And when it's the most active, you throw rookies who just got out of the academy and don't even know their job from anything. Accountability. There is no accountability. During an open investigation, I don't understand how they are placed back into their positions to patrol the streets, and they're only supposed to stay out for 3 days. I've seen a murder. I saw my husband be murdered. So I don't understand how I can't take my sorry ass back to my normal job and not get sick or not have PTSD or not have to take a break and lose my mind in the bathroom when they're back out on the street, literally in my exact neighborhood, where I take my son to go play hockey, where we have to go shop at the grocery store, where I have to literally think consciously all the time that I'm passing where I saw my husband take his last breath, that they get to go back on the street. No mental health reevaluation, or was everyone just okay? Is it totally normal for them to feel okay after killing somebody? It's just, I don't understand how there's nothing. You have to have some sort of retraining. The results should never end in death. So allowing them 3 days paid administrative leave, no follow-up to correct what could have been corrected, I don't understand how you're preventing anything, because now you have cases like in the Aiden's case where they've murdered multiple people and they still have a job. And regardless if they hop departments, they still took more than one human life. And I know a lot of officers who have retired and been officers for 30 plus years, they've never killed a soul. So how can one have multiple bodies and the majority have none? So it has to be, there's something not right as far as the way that the policing are held accountable, period. And you've acknowledged that because you're sitting here and having this working group. So you know that there's a policing issue. And I feel like you validated my concerns just by hosting these panels. So now, we're not crazy. You all know that there's murders that have gone, that should have resulted in prosecution of officers, which is why we're here today. You validate that, which I thank you for, because my case is still open. You guys can make a difference. You can prove to be working towards the progress and be a part of the solution, or you can choose to completely ignore my family like a lot of the other families in this room have been. So my son, he's 12. He's now homeschooled, which is my responsibility because I'm the only parent and we're now a single family. I'm a single mom. But we become carless, which happened to me. We become jobless, which happened to me. We become homeless, which happened to me. And I gotta submit all this stuff to get a response, but I gotta be homeless with my child. So the resources are incredible. They need to be happening a lot sooner. So, and I know my time is up, but like I said, I'm Brian Quinones's wife, and he needs his justice. Thank you.
My name is Shara Blanche. Those on the panel know me. I've been to the last 2 working group sessions. I live in Richfield, less than a mile from where Brian was murdered. I've lived in Richfield my entire life, and as those on the panel know, I'm also the daughter and granddaughter of police officers. I'm going to start by saying that since the last working group, I have learned that 2 people that shared their stories earlier before me tonight I know those officers. I know 2 officers involved in stories that have been shared, and I thought they were the good ones. They're people I know, people I have spent time with, gone on vacation with, and I thought they were the good ones. I've learned otherwise since then. If those are the good ones, what about the bad ones? What about the ones who have murdered more than one person? What about the ones who are back on the street after murdering people in my community with no justice whatsoever? How am I, as a resident of Richfield, with a black son who is 14 years old, supposed to feel that he is safe? Because he's not. Since the last working group session, he had an incident with the school resource officer at the Richfield Middle School, which thankfully the school district handled it really well. The police department, as they have with everything else, has not. They basically said that my son and his friend lied. You're telling me that my 14-year-old lied about what a police officer did? I don't buy it. Not for a second. Still waiting on the video footage of that. You're telling me that I'm supposed to feel safe when tonight, literally when I'm on my way here, my son had walked up to the Target wearing a sweatshirt just like Ashley's. And there's a state trooper there who's glaring at him for his shirt. This state trooper is mad that my son is wearing a shirt that says to fire killer cops. He's not mad that cops are killing people. He's mad that my 14-year-old is making a statement when his friend's dad was murdered less than a mile from our home. And just like Ashley, I have to go to the grocery store. I have to take my son to hockey because my son plays hockey too. I have to drive by where Brian was murdered, where Brian took his last breaths every single day to live my life. And I know that the officers from Richfield are back on the street. There are so many things that I want to see out of this working group and want to see legislative changes on. I want those officers off the street. I want community oversight of these investigations because the BCA can't be trusted. And for those in the room who haven't heard me speak before, my dad was a BCA agent. I know how the BCA rolls. When Philando Castile was murdered, and I'm sorry, Mr. Castile, when he was murdered, the first thing my dad said when I got home from the vigil was, "Can you believe what Governor Dayton said?" Not, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that this happened. Have you seen the video?" No. That's horrible. He's been jaded by 30 years of this, by growing up in that kind of household, because my grandfather was a Minneapolis cop. The community doesn't feel safe. That's on you as this panel to make us feel safe. I also can't help but question why it took 9 days to decide to charge someone with murder recently, yet it's been over 90 days since Brian was murdered and a decision hasn't been made on charging those officers. What's the difference? Officers weren't involved in the one that took 9 days. So there's no cover-up that anyone is attempting to make. Because that's what's happening. I don't buy for a second that that they're not trying to come up with some sort of explanation. I want my son to feel safe. I want my son to trust police officers. I want my son to be able to walk up to Target wearing a sweatshirt, making a statement, and not feel like he has to call me to make sure that he can get home safely. I don't want to have to guide him through, here's how you document it, Damon. This is what I need you to do so that I can take care of this after the fact. Is my time up?
Yeah.
Okay.
And let me just share this with everybody. We've only scheduled you till 8, so we got 9 minutes to go, and we have 20 minutes worth of speakers. So in order to honor everybody who we told till 8, I think that you guys got probably 2 minutes apiece in order to get through it. So, ma'am, if you're
Tashir had one. Tashir asked me to share with the group that if anyone wants to see the pictures of Justin that up close, that she is willing to share those.
Yeah, thank you. So the remainder of our folks are going to have to be about 2 minutes apiece. Thank you very much.
Hi, Keith McCarron. I also worked with law enforcement in the role of working in the Minneapolis 911 Center for 17 years. So I know how the system works from inside too. And yeah, I liked what Al said, that you know, the community is the ones who had prevented riots, not the police. The police have actually incited riots. But the community is the one that has held the riots back from happening. And I'm glad that you're having a listening session, but I'd like to remind you of the words of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who stated that a riot is the language of the unheard. So there's active listening and there's passive listening. If this stays passive and you just hear us and you don't do anything with it, we're escalating. If you take action, we'll look up to you. So, you know, the frustration that I feel is like that we have to have these sessions when we already know the answers. It's not like there's anything that's revelatory here. We already know that police do not have a good record of dealing with mentally ill people. And so police should be the last responders rather than the first responders. No more. I don't want to see somebody die because of a mental health issue. That is not a crime. The police are the ones to enforce crime laws. So I don't want police being the social agencies. We see examples of police culture that values property over people. This has always been the case from the very beginning when they enforced slaving, running down runaway slaves, slave patrols. So, okay, I just want to say the answers are already known. All it takes is the courage for people to follow through on what they already know.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Marcia Magdalene. I'm a resident of the East Side, St. Paul. I'm here today because as a Hmong woman, I have a biracial son who's half black. My only fear when he steps away from me or out the door is that he might get shot, killed by the hands of the police. I have a 12-year-old named Aniki Allen who's a young entrepreneur, and he's an amazing kid who's doing so many great changes. Do see some of his role models, James Baduel, Eliza, Mr. Flowers, all great role models. But still, I have this fear. I tell him, put your hoodie down, make sure you wear no baggy clothes, make sure they see your face. I shouldn't have to tell my son this. So I'm here today to help you guys find a solution, okay? Because we talk and we hear, and so my solution is, well, you know, my question is, who's policing the police? Okay, who's policing the police? And a lot of times when we find that these, you know, people are murdered, is because one, they're a person of color, maybe two, they're fearful of their life, the police fearful of their life, three, the person had mental health. Okay, so my solution to all these things is, why don't, on a show of hands, who's a police officer in here? No one. We need them to be accountable and be in here. Every single police officer, anyone that's on the force, should be here, should be listening to what residents and community members are saying. That's another solution. Every single person that's on the force should actually have a mental health check and evaluation. And every single person on the force should have a racial bias training. These are my solutions. And I thank you guys for your time.
So my name is Andrea Jenkins. I'm going to talk about something that I don't talk about very much in public. In fact, I don't talk about it very much at all. But in 2007, my little brother was a crack addict. He was at the Salvation Army. And the police ran up on him. And he had crack cocaine in his mouth, like many people do. And the police were trying to get the crack out of his mouth and instead pushed it down his throat. He went to the hospital, the bag exploded in his intestines, and he was on life support for 5 days. And we had to pull the plug. It was one of the toughest things that I've ever been through. And my mother, watching her make that decision was really difficult. The only suggestion that I can offer is we have two groups of people who are authorized in our society to determine whether people live or die. That's doctors and police officers. If a doctor makes a mistake, they have malpractice insurance. Police make mistakes, we have to pay for it. I would offer that if we make police have liability malpractice insurance, we will have less police-involved shootings.
Bismillah. Before I give you my name and who individual is that I am or whoever, I'd like to say this country is a country of laws. Every prosecutor in this country is confined by a Supreme Court case. The Supreme Court case said, in essence, that if a police officer is in any way in fear of his life, then he has the right to use physical force in reference to saving his life. So prosecutors like Mike Freeman and others are hindered to a degree by those laws. We need to try to address that here in Minnesota in trying to change some of those laws. Having said that, I have two things. No police officer that I have become aware of in many years has ever arrested another police officer. It just don't happen. Because they don't have the permissions. We have our night, we have Rondo, who now can give those police academies as they come out, those roll call meetings as they go forth every day, permission that if you see another officer do something, that you need to lay back and act on that. Right. And until such time as you start to change the mentality, nothing else will change. Another thing, if another officer or if an officer is accused of one police brutality case, if a complaint is made against him, then he should have to go to some type of sensitivity type training within the community. If it's in the white community, he's white, go to the white community. If it's in the black community, he's black, go to the black community. He needs to do that. And those need to be things that if an individual is in a domestic abuse type situation, the court said you got to go to anger management, you go into anger management. So there shouldn't be no question as to if he has a choice. He should be made to do that. My name is Samuel Sharif Willis. Individuals say that, that's the first time I got that. A lot of people love me, some people hate me, some people just don't know what to think. But I do what I do because of a history of violence, because a lot of the things that I did in my life, I still have nightmares about. I went to the penitentiary for a murder. I've spent 23 years in the penitentiary. Since I've been home, I formed an organization. We work with the Staff Step Foundation. We train 19 guys to deal with trauma, and we go out into the streets of North Minneapolis during the night to try to address the areas of violence that we know exist. On these dark streets, that's where these young brothers and sisters be. Police ain't going up in there unless they're called. They are a reactionary force. We're trying to work on the front end to do those things on a preventive level. See, I like to work, I'm trying to work on the front end as opposed to the back end. And it's one other thing I like to say before I leave. We don't get a dime. I ain't get a dime from nobody. And none of these brothers and sisters that go out there get a dime from anybody. They do it for the love of their community.
Okay, we want to thank everybody who's come out tonight, shared their views. It's very important. Remember, we are expecting to conclude our recommendations at the beginning of February. We will need your help to help advance and advocate for the ideas that emerged from the working group. So please stay in touch with us. And you can go on the website. If you didn't want to talk tonight for any reason, we are collecting ideas on the website as well. And of course, if you mail them to us, we'll be glad to include them. But again, we have other listening sessions. I think Bemidji and is Worthington coming up in just a few days. So this really is a statewide effort, not just a local issue. So the things that you all raise are serious to us. I took notes all night long, and together, if we stick to it and are committed, we'll be able to bring forth real, meaningful change. So you can take us out, Commissioner.
Once again, I appreciate everybody being here. I appreciate the testimony. I appreciate the pain and the heartache that coming here tonight has brought up again. I hope that for those of you that need additional help, that the help we've offered here is available. But I also want you to know that we came into this to try and make a difference. That is the only reason we took up this challenge. And I believe that together we will make a difference. But we can only make the difference that community will support. Ultimately, we work for you. And so your voices are absolutely essential. Your ideas, your passion, even your pain is a part of the solution that we're going to move forward with. So thank you all. Good night.
Sorry, one more thing. Eli Darris is a member of the working group. He's here tonight. Didn't want to go without acknowledging your presence. Thank you for making it. So thanks a lot, everybody.